Wait, when did that happen?
Remember I said, well, what if you have somebody in your thing that is sexually abused you?
We're gonna talk about that.
But then somebody on the thing said, can you say his name out loud so we don't know?
I missed that
So
part.
you're good at this. I'm just gonna let you
I'm gonna be your director.
rely.
Okay, is it gonna
It says rely. No one's watching us.
How is it like? There we go. And I can turn it for you whenever people are talking. Yeah. I gotcha.
Okay, guys. So the Bluetooth speaker is on vacation today. It's Friday is the Bluetooth speaker's day off. So you guys know this song now, right? Fly in the sky, I could go twice as high. Take a look in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere. Friends to know, ways to grow, a reading rainbow. I can be anything, anything. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. Yay! Then we'll do the pun version.
Robin Hood and
And the
Little John.
volcano. The volcano's got
forest.
stuff coming out of it too.
Robin Hood and Little John. Oh,
Reading. All right, one last time, guys. This is your last time to do it. A reading rainbow.
Hey guys, look, the volcano. It's got smoke coming out of it.
Okay.
We
That
did it.
volcano's been part of this retreat since the very beginning.
Reading
That's the
volcano.
first night though. Wow, it was so red. You saw it.
Okay, so we are going to do our last pop quiz. The
Woo.
winner will get this little notebook keychain.
Oh my God, they keep
so
getting
you
smaller.
can-
That's
A
what she
little
said.
book.
Did she?
Smiley
Not to
face,
me.
smiley face.
So it is coming from these sheets. And we are just going to do 5 questions. I will simply give you the explanation, and then you give the rhetorical device. So, number 1. Philip, believe in yourself.
I'm not gonna win.
This joke is. I mean, thanks guys.
As long as you can, break the tie.
I just
It's
can't-
possible
I don't know where my
to
notebook
break
is.
the echo monopoly. Okay. Using exactly the same words more than once.
Oh, it's right here.
Number 2. There's no word bank this time. Using different words to repeat the same idea. Number 3. Using part of something to represent the whole, or the whole to represent the part. Number 4. Emphasizing a point by announcing its importance. Examples might be the vital point is, or most importantly. Number 5, everyday commonplace language.
Everyday what?
Everyday commonplace language. Okay. So number 1, what was it? Repetition. Number 2, using different words to repeat the same idea or point. You get that? Restatement.
Didn't even look at this shit.
Makes it more difficult. Okay. I know you like challenges. So. Using a part of something, this is number 3, to represent a whole, or a whole to represent the part. That is
Synecdoche.
synecdoche. You'll
Yeah.
never forget where you go.
Nice.
All right.
Spell it.
So this was one we didn't use or talk about, so you would have had to read the sheet or just known. Emphasizing a point by announcing its importance is
Highlighting.
signposting.
Ah, it's a
The most
synonym for
important thing
highlighting.
is, the vital point is, the thing to remember is, so you're like really calling, sometimes the importance is obvious, sometimes the writer is like, this is really important, pay attention to this part. That's signposting.
Got it.
Commonplace everyday language is, what kind of language? Colloquial language.
Ah, yeah, of course.
Anyone get 4, right?
No.
3? 2?
That tree.
One.
is
One.
just-
1?
I got one.
Everyone just got
I think
I
Phil
got
was
two.
the.
Okay.
He already won, so we can give it to
Okay,
Phil.
so Dahi,
We give it.
Dahi's the winner.
Yeah.
Echo only won once, so.
Yeah, see? I wasn't. Everybody's giving me like this winning. I'm like, I'm not even
Stop winning, Echo.
What the hell am I gonna do?
Keep winning.
I'm not.
Your
You're
success is
Keep your
our
keys on it,
success.
then you'll always have a little piece
Little
of paper.
nipple
Thank you,
rings.
sister.
Echo, please keep winning.
Hold and
The nose ring?
Hope it don't blow.
Okay, so guys, this is the plan for our last day. This is the last lecture. I'm hoping I have something maybe inspiring to see at some point, but mostly we're just getting into the nitty gritties of the publishing world. We're going to untable those questions about libel, defamation, getting sued. We're going to talk about
fun stuff.
how a writer might make a living as a writer, how you might make a living as a writer. I'll reference the story of my own trajectory. You know, the land that we're sitting on was purchased because I ghost wrote a book for Lance Mudd, this guy. You know, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was more money than I'd ever had at one time in one place. It was about 10 grand.
What does it mean to ghostwrite?
So ghostwriting is, and I've ghostwritten 3 books now, is someone has a really compelling story to tell, but they realize they're not a writer. So I did this in 2 different ways. With Beth Oravitz, she had written like a really, really extremely shitty first draft, and she knew
Yeah,
she
there.
would want to call a writer in to bring it to a publicationable level. So I worked with her and really helped her with all levels: structure, language, organization, and then I worked as her agent. Where we submitted it to a lot of publishing. Now, she has a very compelling story. Her husband was diagnosed with 6 months to live, and she didn't believe the diagnosis, so she kind of went as his patient advocacy against the medical system, who was kind of just saying like it was cirrhosis of the liver and kind of regarding him as like an alcoholic who had brought it upon himself, but he was not a person who drank alcohol, and he actually had this rare condition where your body doesn't take on as much iron. So I'm trying to think another name of this book. But anyways, we didn't find a publisher to take it on. I actually am right after this treatment to get in touch with Beth because we did the thing. We worked with 50. So she has this really compelling story where her husband lived for 8 more years. He actually passed 2 years into our project together, February of 2017. We started in 2013. Been on the shelf for several years, but she's recently gotten in touch with me and like, let's put this out in the world. So I'm gonna lead her to self-publish it. She has like this very amazing story where he needed a heart and liver transplant. Wow. And they looked for donors for many, many times. She had promised her husband that she wasn't going to let him die in the hospital. So she was going to the hospital to pick him up, to check him out so he could die at home. And then she got a phone call saying, we have a transplant donor. So it has like this very cinematic thing. And ultimately, in my own neck injury, her story helped me understand how to deal with my own situation where the medical system wasn't helping me. And having ghost written her story, I realized how valuable it was going to be in the world. So we're still going to work on getting that out into the world with Beth. And, you know, I will recommend to you guys the same thing I recommended to her. Like, why not send out letters to editors and publications and agents and, you know, I wouldn't consider it the worst case scenario, but you have the option of self-publishing. Most of my books I never tried to get published. Having said that, I just self-published. you know, my first book of poetry, I think I had a lot more fun with it, and it's very hard to get poetry published. But there are small presses, our exercise is going to be for you guys to find a publisher, a publication, or a contest through a database, pw.org, I'll give you to look for, to then over the break either submit a poem in a contest or submit an article for publication. So the afternoon's going to be much freer. We're not going to have our 3 o'clock get together, and we're going to start our performance pieces at 4:30 gathering here. So after we break here, you'll have about 4 hours to be on your own. And then between 1 and 3, I am scheduling one-on-one sessions if you guys want to meet to talk specifically about your project. I realize I'm not as accessible as I would like to be to all of you, simply because we've got a whole retreat, but I know that that can be really useful. And that's space, you know. From the retreat, with friends, I say I'm always willing to read one chapter of a book and give feedback. Consider you all friends. So I'm willing to do that for all of you guys because you came to the retreat. From that point, even my close friends, I give them my best rates possible because ultimately my profession is to make a living as a writer. I have more projects than I have bandwidth to get out into the world, so I'm not able to give myself so fully, like I'm not able to read somebody's book for them unless we come to some sort of exchange or be it life exchange, financial exchange, something like this. And that's hard for me. My inclination is to say yes and to want to help everyone, but that's the wisdom of a guy in his late 30s who understands the constraints of time and space and the value of my work and the fact that I sacrifice a lot of what I would like to do if I had more time, but I have the time that I have, and as my profession, I put value behind it, but as also someone that believes in giving, that's how I've been able to say, okay, any friend of mine, I'm happy to read one chapter, which can often provide feedback that you can take through a whole book. So, but today I'm accessible minimum 20 minutes. If all 6 of you want to meet, then I have 20 minutes over that 2-hour period for each person. If not everyone needs to, Tahi understands I'm accessible to him at any time. But you know, you're welcome to meet with me too. So we'll schedule that, and you'll have a very long block to really make the most use of, and then to also come up with a 15-minute time performance piece, because we will be at 15 minutes ringing a bell, which means you have 2 minutes to wrap it up. And this is something that's really important. If you're going to be on a podcast and they say, hey, we have 10 minutes for you to read something, you can't read a half an hour on that podcast. So, you know, I used to be a radio DJ in high school on the graveyard shift on the weekends, and I would have to read the weather in 30 seconds. And then sometimes I'd have 2-minute blocks, and that was really good because I had a clock that was literally ticking down, and ABC News was going to come on to our broadcast channel at the top of the hour, whether I was finished or not. Like, that was going to cut me off and take over. So I had to really learn about timing, and so that's also just part of being a professional writer, is you're given certain blocks and you'll have to fill them. So tonight you have 15 minutes. So if you have a chapter, you might want to time yourself that takes 30 minutes to read. You're going to have to make some choices about, you know, how much talking you want to do, because you're welcome to do 5 minutes of setup to talk about your project, but that will take away from your other time, and that way we have a 2-hour session this evening where 8 of us have a 15-minute block. So that is our flight plan for today. You have a 4-hour block essentially after this to use it as you please. Lunch is at the farm on your own time, and you have time to like do a first draft, polish something, but then you definitely want to spend some time figuring out what is my best work that I want to share. Ideally from the retreat, but I also open it to anything you've ever written that you want to share because it's your space to fill up.
Wait, I was going to ask you, the pw.org, you had told me that before I came as well. What would you suggest for people that are publishing newly? Would you just do the ones that are like no entry fee? Or do you actually feel that it's like wiser to do the ones with entry fee because less people enter those?
Less people enter those, and there's usually more financial rewards. Like there's some contests that, yes, it's a $20 entry fee, but it's a $1,000 prize. So maybe you will spend $300 before you win such a prize, but I think if you're submitting quality work and you're in line with what the contest is looking for, you know, my first writing contest I ever entered, I won a trip for two to Ireland with $500 in spending money for this story called Constipated with Love. It was a decongestant company that had this contest called Get Uncorked and Go to Cork. I'm not making this up.
Oh my god.
And my story, Constipated with Love, won. And in 2007, I won a trip for two to Ireland. And it's kind of absurd when I think about it. Like, and we'll talk about this. The one time I approached a company for me to write for them, I got a 4-year. It's like remarkable how good my batting rate is when I've actually put myself out there. And it's tragic how few times I've actually done that, given how much I've actually done really well with that. So, you know, don't spend money you don't have, I guess, but it's, you know, $5, $10. Sometimes there's reading fees. I wouldn't do it for a publication that doesn't pay. You know, with pw.org, and we'll talk about Publishers Weekly and Writer's Digest. These are other resources. Yeah, I think you can choose to if you don't want. I mean, you've already all invested in a writer's retreat, so you're putting, you know, value into your enterprise of writing. But yeah, we'll table that and get back to it. So let's read first Anne Lamott's chapter on publication, and then let us talk about some important things, because when we talk about libel, defamation, and invasion of privacy, we're going to have to have a serious adult consideration of what we're putting out and what the potential liability could be to ourselves and our personal story, because as much as I'd like to say nothing can happen and you have nothing to worry about, that's not true. Can you get sued for writing something? You can get sued for anything. Anyone that can file paperwork and hire an attorney can at least take you to litigation, and from there it's up to a court. So I would be incorrect to tell you not to worry about it, but we're going to get to that and how to handle it. So from Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird, publication. All right, let's talk about publication. Let's talk about the myth of publication. Say you finished your book, or the draft of the book, or a whole lot of stories, and you send them off to your agent, if you have one, or to a friend's agent, or to an agent you found in the Yellow Pages, or in the literary marketplace. So you actually already have an editor. Say you actually already have an editor somewhere, or an editor who once wrote you an admiring rejection letter. So you send your book or stories to him or her and to a couple of friends. As I've mentioned, I'm one of those people who feels beside herself the day after I've stuck the manuscript in the mail. It can't have even arrived, and already I'm feeling bitter and resentful about what a cold, lazy, sadistic slime I'm surrounded by. There are other writers, and you may be one of them, who just push back their sleeves and get to work on the next piece. I could never be close to a person like this, but I know they exist. Anyway, if you are like me, you wait and check your mail 10 times each day and feel devastated and rejected every hour that there is no response. Finally, if you are lucky, a week later you get a note from your agent's assistant that the manuscript has in fact arrived, and maybe one of the friends has called to say that he or she read a part of it and that it's just terrific, and do not worry, but you go ahead and have a small breakdown anyway, waiting for your agent or editor to call you and tell you it's brilliant. Every time the phone rings, you sing, "Please, let it be him. Oh dear God, it must be him." But it's not him. And then you die and go on a massive eating binge and think about what phonies most of your friends are. And then you calm down. You go for a walk. You're a little better. Then you try to read something. But you end up reading your own manuscript and reeling with shame at how bad it is. But just when you start to go into an actual spasm, your friend calls back and says he's just read another chapter, and really, on the souls of his grandchildren, he swears it's the best thing you've ever written. He loves it, and he loves you. So you are okay again, for a good 10 minutes or so. After another week, you call your agent because you can't stand pretending to be cool anymore. but your agent hasn't read your manuscript yet because he is swamped with infinitely more important matters. He tells you with the faintest hint of irritation that the very second he finishes it or hears from your editor, you will be called, and that everything is probably just fine. Okay, the agent asks, all better. You want to go rip off your face instead. Instead, you pray. And then you see in a flash of blinding insight that your agent and editor are in cahoots. And what you heard as irritation was really the strain of withholding hysterics. After being on the phone all morning, reading each other passages from your book, they agree that it is the most embarrassingly bad book ever written, and they are honking and screaming with laughter. At one point, your editor is laughing so hard that she has to take some digitalis, and your agent ruptures a blood vessel in her throat. They are reading the scene to each other where your hero's father dies. And if you actually have a contract with these people, you assume that your editor has to get off the phone at this point. Like, so I'm going to skip a little bit. She's just going through this normal dread that we have when we've sent a book for our friend to read, for an editor, we don't hear back. I would say my experience, most of the time, you get a one-sentence rejection instead of, a long analysis of this thing that you put your heart, your soul into. And if you can't deal with rejection, you can't really be a published author. It's as simple as that. So I've changed my goal to getting published to collecting rejection letters. Every week I'm getting emails from publications rejecting my work, and then I feel good because I know it means I'm submitting my work out in the world. And every now and again, people want to publish it, and that's great, but that is the exception even for professional writers. And we'll talk in a little bit about befriending publications. In the beginning as a freelance writer, I was in what I now call the article rat race, meaning I was under the illusion that it was a pleasant way to live your life and one day make a living if I could continually command higher markets of publications. Outside Magazine pays $1,000 for an article. So I started to do the math like, if I got like 3 articles in a big magazine one every month, I'd be earning like $3,000 a month. But the fact is, you can't plan on someone publishing their work. But what I recommend is to live a life that doesn't compromise your creative efforts. So you want to, as much as possible, either live a living that allows you the free time to create your work, or do something that is close to your work. I ghost wrote a book for someone, and that's how I paid for the land that later became Haruna. Now, I was having my own books I was writing at this time, but those books weren't paying my bills. But Lance Mudd, we had 6 months, so he was different from Beth Oravets in that he was a former rodeo star, gone alcoholic, gone businessman, gone millionaire, found Jesus, went to Mexico, built a church, and he had talked with 5 other people about ghostwriting his book, and I gave him the option that you can write up your story as best you can and we can work from there, or I can just interview you. So me and Lance would have a 2-hour conversation once a week for 6 months, and he was like, "Why don't you told me?" He's from Texas. Louisiana. I spent some time there. "Why don't you told me I didn't have to write anything?" I said, "That's my guy." Everyone else kind of told him, yeah, you kind of write up a draft, and I told him, no, I can. And this is how I learned this process from a book I ghost wrote in 2007, my first book, Amazing Grace for Survivors, where I was interviewing people for their stories and then telling them in a consistent voice for a collection as a first person. So I had done that when I was 22. I got paid $1,000 as an advance with this publication. So an advance doesn't mean free money. It's an advance on the royalties the publisher imagines you will one day get. So for me, that $1,000, it was a small publication, Ascension Press, but I still get checks now, 13 years later, every quarter, One of the checks I kept to frame. It's like $1.52. I meant to bring it here to show you like the big money of being a successful writer. It's this check for $1.52. But that's the smallest check I've ever gotten. They're usually like $8, and I've been getting checks for 13 years. And you can imagine if I become more successful, you know, these things start to add up, and you know they can start to be significant. So normally you're making a 15% royalty in the publishing world, 10 to 15%, unless you have a reason to get a bigger contract. Normally an agent, if an agent wants you to pay them up front, it's called a scam artist, not an agent. Because how an agent makes their living is they make 15% off what you make from the publisher. So for them, if one of their writers is making a living off writing, they probably need about 10 writers making their living off writing because they're only earning 15% on what the writer makes. And a lot of big publications don't accept unagented fiction or unagented manuscripts. Meaning you want to find an agent that believes in you. And most agents are people like us, people that have a love for writing, maybe writers themselves, and they found themselves in this literary niche of being a Gladwellian connector. So they're very well connected to publishers. They know editors by names, and then they kind of make your case for you. Now, for Jerry the Hamster, I'm going to be doing two things. I'm going to be approaching the publishers that don't require agents, and I'm going to be approaching agents with my cover letter, with my sample chapters, submission requirements, submission guidelines, they call it. Every publication, they're often hard to find, but you'll find on some backlink to their site what they require for you to submit to them, and they're not universal. Some might want you to send the whole manuscript. Some might want you to send the first chapter. Some might want you to send the first 3 chapters. The most important thing is to follow their directions. And rather than creating all this content and chapter synopsises, how I've generally done it is I've created what I've needed as I've needed it, and then I've kept it in a folder. So if this publication wants me to do, you know, 1-page chapter summaries for 5 chapters or something, or a whole prospectus, which would be a whole plot treatment of the whole thing, I'll create them as needed, and I'll store them, and then when I approach another publisher that wants the same thing, you know, they want different things, but there's a limited amount of ways they want you to submit to them. So you want to have a cover letter introducing who you are, where this book fits in the literary market, that's important, what it's most comparable to in terms of successful things, but you also don't want to be over cliche, like how these editors and agents are getting the next Eat, Pray, Love all the time. So if you're claiming your book is the next Eat, Pray, Love, they're kind of like, yeah, so is everyone else. And we're going to do this afternoon. You guys are going to find a publication. You can either do it as a trial run for fun, or actually, I think Christina, you're actually going to be sending a proposal to a publisher today, which means you have a small possibility, a very small one. You have to emphasize that. But it feels good. You know, 2 years ago, I did that with Jerry the Hamster. It's a project I know I dedicated when I came back from India. I knew it was going to be something I'd be taking off the shelf. Fisher's Treat has helped me take that off the shelf. And yeah, I will feel better when I have the possibility of its publication out in the world. First thing you have to generally do, especially in a work of fiction, is finish the book. Now, if you are an authority on something, you might be able to get a book deal just because of who you are, how connected you are, how much that you're an expert in a certain field, and how much a publisher might want to work with you on that. So I'm going to read a little bit more from Anna Latz. Okay, cool. We'll save her for the end. I would like to read this article. We're going to get back to publishing, but a lot of us brought up wanting to talk about libel, getting sued, and things like that. So the fact of the matter is, so defamation means that you've said something untrue about someone that has caused their reputation to be lowered. That's defamation. So what if everything that you say is true in your book? Can you still be sued for defamation? Yes, you can be sued for anything. Anyone that can fill out the proper paperwork that can take you to court, whether you're innocent or guilty, can take you to court, and you have to mount a defense either on your own or you have to pay money to hire a lawyer to do that. So that is a reality. Yeah.
What about if I'm in Australia and someone in America wants to sue me? How does that work?
I'm not exactly sure the court legalities. Now, we're going to talk about how unless you have a #1 bestseller, it's probably not going to be an issue. And we're also going to talk about one way you can sort of get out of it is to change identifying names and locations. So if an incident happened in Hawaii, is the fact that it happened in Hawaii important to the story, or is it important to you telling your story? Because you can still tell that story in your manuscript, and then when you get to this point where everything's done and you're putting it out in the world, you're going to want to look from a legal perspective. You can hire a legal expert, but that's going to be like $5,000 minimum. And generally, we're broke writers that don't have $5,000 to hire a legal expert. A big publisher will have these conversations and bring their own legal department to just make sure that they're not, on the hook for anything. But changing names, identifying details, and locations, then you can even claim that the person making the claim against you, it's not even about them and that they're so narcissistic. You can mount these sort of things like, why do you even think this is about you? Because maybe you're going to say it happened in Brazil instead of Hawaii, because having heard your draft, the fact that it happened in Hawaii is not important to your story. So, but what I really have to emphasize is don't think about this when you're writing your story. Write your story, and when your story is done, think about these things. And you can always say it's fiction based on reality, because then any defamation suit, you'd be like, let's read this article. I'll send it to the group, and then we'll talk more about it. Libel Law for Writers and Authors, What You Need to Know. This is by Harry Bean. What are defamation and libel? I'm going to talk fast just for our own time's sake. Firstly, you might hear the terms used interchangeably. Libel and defamation mean effectively the same thing, and they refer to any published material that damages the reputation of an individual or an organization. You might hear the term slander thrown about as well, which is defined as defamation by word of mouth. As well as books, this covers material on the internet, as well as radio, television, broadcast. Even drama and fiction can be defamatory if they damage someone's reputation. You can only publish defamatory material if it comes within one of the recognized legal defenses. If it doesn't, the publication will amount to libel, and you may have to pay substantial damages. The purpose of libel law. Libel law protects individuals or organizations from unwanted, mistaken, or untruthful attacks on their reputation. A person is liable if a publication exposes them to hatred, ridicule, or contempt, causes them to be shunned or avoided, generally lowers them in the eyes of society, discredits them in their trade, business, or profession. Get your facts right. The most important point is to make absolutely sure that what you are printing or writing is true. It's the most important point. Make sure everything that you're saying is true. Do not make claims or accusations that you cannot prove. Even if you think you can do this, be cautious. Proving things in court is very difficult. And the test of what the words mean and what a reasonable reader is likely to take as the natural and ordinary meaning in their full context, what you intend as the author or publisher, is irrelevant. If you write something that cannot be substantiated, the credibility of your site, organization, or cause may be questioned. It can also land you with an expensive lawsuit, and there is no legal aid for libel cases. The burden of proof lies with the defendant. In libel cases, the burden of proof lies with the defendant, the author or publisher, in writing example terms, and not the plaintiff. In other words, you must prove that what you write is true. The person you've targeted does not have to prove that you're wrong. This is because libel laws are meant to compensate people for damage done to their reputations. They're not meant to punish someone for lying. So you can lie, and that's not what defamation is. But if you lie and it damages someone's reputation, that's defamation. and you have to prove then that what you have written is true. 3 tips for writing safely. Don't rely on the literal meaning. You cannot solely rely on proving that your statements were literally true if, when they're taken as a whole, they have an extended and more damaging meaning. Also, for example, if someone was guilty of fraud once, calling him a fraudster in a way which might suggest he's still doing the same may well give rise to a libel which can't be defended. Be especially wary when referring to events in the past. Don't exaggerate in your claims or language. For example, a company may run a factory which produces certain chemicals. For you to suggest that babies will be born deformed as a result may get you into libel trouble. Innuendo can catch you out. Your comments may not appear particularly defamatory taken at face value, but greater knowledge of a person or situation may make it problematic because of the innuendo, the assumption. To say Mr. Jones doesn't recycle his waste paper may sound harmless enough, but to people who know that Mr. Jones is a Green Party activist, the innuendo of the statement is that he is hypocritical in his politics. So let's say Al Gore, right? I think he does fly in a private jet, but let's say he didn't fly in a private jet and someone claimed Al Gore flies in a private jet. That could be very defamatory because his whole political career is based on being a green activist, and he's using all these fossil fuels for his private jet. So suggesting that, and if it catches on, has a big deal. Quoting others. If you publish defamatory remarks about people or organizations made by other people, you will be just as liable to be sued as they are. So if you can't prove the truth of their statements, don't repeat them. So you can't just say this person said that about this person and assume you're off the hook if you've published that thing and what they've said is false or unprovable. Drawing unprovable conclusions. It is a common mistake to draw unverifiable conclusions from basic facts. For example, if Mr. Brown is seen going into a hotel room with a call girl, this does not necessarily mean he enjoyed a night of passion, and will certainly not prove that he did. So, again, if you see a man going into a room with a call girl, you can't publish the assumption of what happened there. Irresponsible adjectives. Be very careful about the adjectives you use. A misplaced word can result in costly action. If you are campaigning about a factory that releases chemicals into the atmosphere, referring to the factory as poisoning the atmosphere is inadvisable. So just tell us the facts. What chemicals are they releasing into the air based on what they're doing? Defenses against libel. The law lays down a few ways in which defamatory publications may be defended. If the defenders succeed, the publisher wins. But if they don't succeed, the publisher loses. The complainant will have been libeled and will therefore be entitled to be paid damages and their legal costs. The defenses are listed below. First, justification. The most usual defense against libel is to prove that the information published is true. But this can be a dangerous route because an unsuccessful plea could increase the damages against you because you will have increased the harm to the complainant. And remember, you must be able to deal with every libelous possibility, such as inference and innuendo. If your statement implies something greater, it is not enough to prove that the statement is just literally true. Merely asserting something will not be sufficient to prove it's true. You will need witnesses and documents to back up your assertions, whether they're yours or someone you're quoting. Second, fair comment. This covers content, mainly opinion, that cannot by its nature be true or false. So your opinion, and things that are stated as just your opinion, you're allowed to have an opinion, you're allowed to publish your opinion, you just have to clearly state that it is your opinion. So like your waiver in your book, if for some reason you ever ended up in court, is your best defense, because you're saying, this is all my opinion. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we can change certain details to protect us from,
And in the beginning, couldn't you say, like, this text has been dramatized for, like, creative nonfiction, like I don't know, something about it being
fictitious and that in certain details being dramatized for effect of the book and using different names.
Yeah.
So that
And
it just-
like we'll get to this in the article. Your easiest and surest line of defense would be to call something fiction based on
real life.
real life,
Okay.
because in that point, and we'll get to that in this. Okay. Here's an example, albeit an older one. In 2001, Daily Mail lost a libel action brought by a former Tottenham Hotspur chairman, Alan Sugar, over the remark that he was a miser when he ran the club because he didn't give his manager enough money to buy top-class players. The jury were not sufficiently persuaded that there was any factual basis for making this comment. They didn't deem it was a fair comment. He was awarded £100,000. So the Daily Mail called this guy a miser, and then this guy didn't like being called a miser. He took the Daily Mail to court, and the court concluded they didn't have enough facts to conclude that he was a miser by not spending enough on top players, and he was awarded £100,000.
So then he would have like miser. He got some more money. No,
He sounds like a miser.
Miser! Sounds exactly like a miser.
Sorry. No. Last, privilege. Privilege is the defense where the law recognizes that individuals should be able to speak their minds, and others to report what they say without fear of being sued, even if they get their facts wrong. It allows people to speak freely in court proceedings and debates in government, and allows for such proceedings to be reported so long as reports are both fair and accurate. And then other than libel, defamation is the right to privacy. Writers tend to think a lot about libel issues, but they would be well to consider privacy as well. As we mentioned earlier, you might write something that's factually true and thus not subject to a libel suit, but it might invade someone's privacy. Human rights law gives each of us a right to privacy. So even if you are not saying anything defamatory about me, you might nevertheless reveal enough about my personal life that I feel my privacy has been invaded. Under such circumstances, I would in theory have an actionable claim against you. And as it happens, we at Jericho Writers, that's this publication, have never seen a book that was basically publishable, but which fell down on libel issues. Meaning they've never found a book that, they wanted to publish this book, but there's too much libel issues. Because you can always usually change enough to get out of that. But on the other hand, we have seen examples of a book that was publishable except for privacy issues. The case I particularly remember the case I particularly remember was a really excellent and shocking memoir by a British-American woman who had been forced into an arranged marriage and had been very badly treated by both husband and mother-in-law. The husband had in fact been charged with assault by a court and convicted, so libel issues weren't in play. The substance of the book's allegations had been tested in court and upheld. So a court had agreed with what this person said in their book, that this person did these things. And the text was certainly defamatory, but was most demonstrably true. So you can defame someone. Someone might be defamed, and the court is only concerned if what you said was true in a defamation case. But in a privacy case, you could say something true about someone, and a court could conclude that you invaded their privacy. So the thing that broke the book, we got an agent for the author, but not a publisher, was the mother-in-law's right to privacy. This awful woman who had been highly complicit in her son's abusive behavior nevertheless had a right to privacy that the courts might have been willing to uphold. So all the publishers contacted by the agent refused to publish the book. A note on deceased. It is important to note that a person's right to privacy expires when they expire. A deceased person, you can always wait till these people are dead, but I'm going to advise you not to do that. A deceased person cannot be libeled,
Just kill them.
nor can their descendants, estates sue for defamation on the deceased spouse. So their next of kin can't sue you. However, individuals, be they descendants or no, can have grounds for a suit if they believe that their reputations have been marred by the statement as well. Satire and parody. You might be wondering about your brilliant satire of the American political system, in which you've clearly changed the names and exaggerated details, but where your fictional president, Ronald Dump, retains a certain je ne sais quoi that ensures no modern reader will be confused about who you're satirizing. You're blurring the line between truth and fiction, but in that blurring lies your best defense. So, even though everyone knows when you're talking about Ronald Dump, who you're talking to, that satire and that blurring is your best legal defense. With a libel case, the facts at hand are largely rooted in the plaintiff arguing as though you've said something untrue about them that has damaged their standing in the world. But if the something you've written about is so obviously untrue, so completely exaggerated, it is very easy to have a case dismissed by pointing out that what you've written is fiction, made up story commenting on present actions as opposed to attempting to portray them in a realistic light. Libel and privacy law in the real world. This is the take home. Now I've scared you about writing, and now none of you want to tell your story or publish your story because you're all afraid of getting sued. But let's get real now. Libel and privacy law in the real world. Writers anxious about libel privacy can, in most cases, relax. 1. It is exceptionally rare for a novelist to be sued for libel. As long as you are not obviously writing about a roman à clef, your single strongest defense to any claim will just be to point out that the way the book is categorized, and then they say, "This is fiction, dummy." So that's your best defense if it's fiction. This is fiction, dummy. Like, what are you talking about? This is a fictional novel. Like, at that point, you know, let's say you're writing and self-publishing a memoir that isn't vastly defamatory of anyone and isn't very privacy invasive either. You do the real life people and the courtesy of changing names and other details so it's not obvious who you're talking about. Let's say you commission a print run of 500 copies and sell a few ebooks as well. It is theoretically possible that you face lawsuit for the issues talked. Is it theoretically possible that you face a lawsuit for the issues talked about in this post? Yes. Is it practically likely? No. It will be, for most authors, a vanishingly small possibility. And if you are writing anything else non-fiction-y, very much the same applies, at least 99-point-something% of the time. Yes, the conventional advice is to take legal advice, but that advice will cost a minimum of £3,000 if you're going to a properly experienced lawyer. So for most writers, the actual practical advice will be one, and I'll send this article to our group. Proceed thoughtfully and with caution. Change names and other details. Make your characters actually different from the real world subjects. Think about privacy as well as libel. 4. Be realistic. If you are making serious comments about public people and your work is likely to have significant readership impact, then you can't wing it. So if you're planning on writing a bestseller, you got to think about these things, because those people in your book that might sue you will know about your book. In all other cases, just take good care and be fine. For what it's worth, I have written fiction and nonfiction, and only once have my path crossed with a libel lawyer, paid for by the publisher, not me. I was working with a prominent hedge fund manager, and his text made some quite serious allegations about, for example, the non-tax-paying habits of General Electric. So here's a really good way to also protect yourself would be to publish under a pseudonym. You know, if you're, and this has to do with the fact of we're following the wrong path as writers if we're doing it to elevate our own name and fame. So if we do have a book that has this type of possibility, publishing under a pseudonym while also changing, you should always change your names of your subjects or ask their permission. Get their permission in writing, don't ask them over the phone. Better to ask them on email if they can use their name. And you know, some of the people that we'd be most afraid of are people not currently in our life. So anyone that is in our life, we should ask their permission. Send them exactly over the email what we're going to be publishing about them, and then get their written response that they're okay with it. That would protect us if they change their mind about that after you go number 1 on the bestsellers list and they think, oh, there might be some money in this. also, if it's a personal story, these people are close to you, so you kind of know what they're capable of and how much risk you run from this. So I would say just changing those names and identifying features, putting in the introductory thing that this is your own version of events, like Echo did very well in her book. These are all things that could protect you from it. And having the conversation with these people ahead of time. Yeah.
Oh, no, finish.
Oh.
Yes, ending.
Having these conversations, if you can, with these people ahead of time, seeing where they stand on it. And because there's a legal issue here, but there's also a human issue here. Like, we're not writing to get revenge. If we are, then I don't want those people in my writer's retreat or to help them in any way. Like, we don't want to hurt people. We don't want to get even. So we're writing often for healing and to help others. And along the way, we can choose to be as kind as we can, you know. And like Anne Lamott says, you know, if they wanted to be treated better, they should have behaved better. But she's usually writing fiction, you know. So.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, if you write under a pseudonym, but then you happen to do a book tour, like, how does, you know what I mean?
As this article points out, like, I would be remiss to when you guys are asking me this question, to pretend like everything's fine. So I'm just telling you the worst case, the worst thing that could happen to you. You're not going to go to jail, but you could be criminally liable for paying damages if a court concludes that you damaged someone's reputation or invaded someone's privacy. Best defense, change their names and identifying features so that you can make the claim that this isn't even them. So what are they talking about? And that's just like courtesy to other human beings, because ultimately it's not going to change your story. You know, if you suffered sexual abuse, you might, you know, you are a victim, so you don't want to become the victim again from someone that might be a psychopath willing to take you to court over. So you also want to think about, like, you know, these people in your life. So who's going to go fly off the wall at what they read and like want to get revenge on you? Because those are dangerous people. Probably people you don't want to deal with anymore. You especially don't want to show them up to court. But it's also a lot of work on their side to take you to court. It's a lot of expense on their side. So just kind of scan your landscape of who you're dealing with. And, you know, if they've passed away, there's no libel for the defamation for the deceased. So you're exonerated from that. Don't let it interfere with telling your story. You know, tell your story the way your soul needs to tell it. And then when you get past your final draft, this is something you look at in if you get a big publisher, they're going to look at this with you. If you're self-publishing, you just want to be aware of this, because it would just be a really deflating situation to find yourself. I've never heard of anyone falling into this. Small self-published works, you know, something Neil's going to want to think about because of who he's dealing with in the story. But he's handling it really well. You know, he's not saying. So you don't want to make claims you can't back up factually. And so if someone mistreated you, you just got to really present it as Echo did really well, her own story. I can't imagine if you change names, identifying features, also put that this is just your own opinion, which you're entitled to have it. You're entitled to say your own opinion. You're entitled to write your own opinion. You're entitled to publish your own opinion. But understand that others have rights not to have untruthful things said about them. And even if it is true, they have a right to privacy. So how can you present your narrative in a way that doesn't defame anyone or doesn't invade their privacy? And poetry is always fiction. Poetry can always be considered fiction because poetry is classified under fiction. So, you know, that's one good thing about poetry and
writing music.
Yeah.
so,
This one's good.
Yeah.
nothing to worry. I see some worry, Wendy.
No. Well, I'm just trying to figure out like how I would need to change some things and you know where I'm going with things. I need to mind map a little
Mhm.
more.
Yeah. And this, you have books like this don't write themselves in a month.
Right.
They don't write themselves in a few months. It's usually like a year.
Yeah, this is going to be an ongoing thing because
Uh-huh.
I think I want to have this project and then have something in the barber world kind of project as well.
Yeah.
That's a different book. I don't know.
So the fact of the matter is, contact me in a year when you're looking at publishing to review these things.
Yeah.
But don't let it interfere with your writing now, because it's important for you to not. It's just going to interfere with your writing in an unproductive way if you're thinking about this in the first drafting process. Just tell the truth.
Yeah.
And then if you get to that, what a beautiful point when you have to make these considerations, because it means you're on the verge of publishing your work. So,
Just tell,
That-
just tell the story, and then worry about all that other stuff.
change California to Utah, change Bolivia to Colombia, if it's, you know, not essential to the story, and then change the names and
Yeah.
identifying features of the characters.
And you can go back and just do that later, right? Like it's okay to write all these people and then go back and change all of that.
Because defamation also implies that their reputation has been damaged in a public sphere. So if you're not even writing or talking about them, how could they even make that claim, right? Facts of the matter.
So what my question is, like, you know, my sister and my brother are still alive, my mom's still alive.
Yep.
If I wanted to, would I need to make this more of a story, not from coming from me, like saying it would be, or would I want
From
to?
this point, just tell your story.
Okay.
And then when your story is ready to be published, just look at it through the lens of, am I under any legal jeopardy for what I'm saying? And if so, how can I make the necessary changes to exonerate myself from that risk?
Okay.
Simple. And if you're watching online, I am not qualified to dispense legal advice. This is just my best assessment from what I've heard. These are all my own opinions, and I'm not
Well,
trained
we
as
also,
a
people have to be
copyright
able to
attorney.
afford to sue you as well.
Mhm.
And I mean, most of my family is dead, and the ones that are in the book, and the others can't afford a lawyer, so that's helpful. So it's like, can they afford to sue you? And the
Yeah,
guy,
so-
and the shaman can't sue me because he's already under investigation. So it would just make him look worse, right? If you were to say that's me in the book, that would just make him look.
Yeah, especially when you've hidden his identity in the book for him
Yeah.
to make a claim that it is. So
Yeah.
hide people's identity, and then they would have a tough time proving that that's even them. And a lot of these things, like we're talking about, like this one is writing about people that are writing about big companies like General Electric. Like if you are conservationist and you're calling out big corporations, you got to be a lot more careful than if you're writing a fictional novel based on real accounts, because General Electric probably has a department where every time somebody's writing about General Electric on the internet,
Wait
someone
till
at
they're all
General
done.
Electric looks at that and they're looking at libel and defamation because they have the resources to go after you. So you just want to be. I'm glad I'm not a journalist, man. My foray in journalism was interesting. First time I published an article on CNN, like I was getting death threats in Guatemala for
What?
telling me. I learned a little bit. I was a little sensationalist. I should have just presented the facts instead of my own for another time. But
Shit.
I had someone who worked directly for the Guatemalan president visiting me in my office because I reported on a string of 6 stabbings that happened in Antigua in 2011, and it was seen as my article had 30,000 reads within 24 hours of being published, and it attracted some of the shadowy elements of this country I wasn't really aware of were watching until I was made a public statement. And I remember the security head of Zacatepec is for the president, so the president has a security head in all 26 states. The one of the state I was living in found me, came to my office, and advised me to take it down. And I said, no, I'm not going to take it down. I will change this sensational thing about it. And when you make an arrest, I would love to do a follow-up, interview on this. Because it was basically in a 9-by-9 block area. 2 guys in a pickup were driving around, robbing and stabbing people for 3 hours. I was a warden for the U.S. Embassy at the time, so I was like involved in like helping some of these people get the resources they needed, getting taken to the hospital, whatnot. And I didn't get a liable case or anything like that, but the people that didn't want to, the very rich people that felt that my article could publish tourism, were also in bed with governmental officials, and that was, I mean, I'm just grateful I'm not like a political journalist correspondent, because the stuff you have to deal with and the people that are going to try to take you to court, like, may I never be, I mean, none of us ever have to be part of such a embattled world. You know? We're constantly in fighting. You guys want to talk about money now?
Yeah.
Show
Money.
me the money.
Okay.
Yeah, Tony fights.
Okay, so how do you make a living as a writer? Do any of you want to make a living as a writer?
I would say no to a few euros.
I don't know, how do we make money?
Have an OnlyFans on the
I
side.
mean, the classic, here's the one classic model. You write a book, a big publisher wants to publish it, they give you a $50,000 advance to publish your book. A bestseller is selling like 100,000 copies. You make a 15% royalty off the cover price. So say you make $150,000 if you sell 100,000 copies. If you're making a 15% royalty off a $10 cover price. Not bad.
Yeah.
Very hard to get that. Fiction is a very hard genre to do this in. Poetry. You know, Neil, if he wants to write about permaculture, non-fiction, it's like I told him, you don't have to even write the book, because you can just get in the habit of writing a cover letter to publishers about, if you're an expert on something. If you are an expert in permaculture, you can show that you give courses teaching permaculture, and you have a book that shows it offers something new to the marketplace of books, then you're going to want to maybe, even before you write the book, find out who these people are, who these publishers are. First, you want to start making part of your writing life having nothing to do with writing, and start to think about publishing. You know, you can start looking at books like, who published this book? And then we find out nobody did. Anchor Books. Okay. So if I have a book on the craft of writing, I've even thought in this retreat that maybe Dahi and I butting heads together. This retreat could definitely have a guide that we write with the resources I use, that instead has my own words packaging passages of these resources, and I could definitely, all writers, many writers, eventually, like Stephen King does this, has this, eventually write a writer's guide, usually. So I think at some point in my life, I'll have my own Luke McGuire Armstrong on writing. But anyways, so Anchor Books. Then you want to go to Anchor Books' website. You want to Google them. You want to find out how they accept submissions. Just familiarizing yourself with this world is very important, because many writers that have been writing for a long time, even published writers, have never done this. They've never like picked up a book and figured out what publishers are out there. You know, if you go on Fifth Avenue in New York, you see all these tall rectangular buildings. That's considered, and the Avenida de las Americas, that's like the world's publishing is housed in like one block in New York, in these very high-rise buildings. That's where Penguin is, that's when Howlin' Muffin is, that's where like all of the big publishers are. Now unfortunately you can't just come in there and knock on the door and they won't really see you. But nowadays you can also find literary agents on social media. So if you're on Instagram, maybe find all of the literary agents, editors, and publishers that might be interested in your work. Start following them on Instagram and start leaving comments on their posts and start becoming a known person to them. Because someone's reading it in these places, and that's definitely something you can do. Interestingly enough, on like Facebook and YouTube, one way I'm You know, this was my first book of poetry. I Poems for the Dolphins Click Home About Us. This is my, not most recent, but this is my 2021 poetry book that I've sold about 600 copies of, which isn't a huge amount. But I also make a 40% royalty because it's self-published. So by selling 600 copies, we're multiplying 6 by 4. We're looking at like $2,400 in royalties from this book that showed up in my bank account. If it, and I do have a poetry book that I am going to be going to pw.org. These are ones to write down. I'll also follow up and put them in the group.
If it's self-published, why is it 40% royalty and not like 90% or like
Well,
who's getting the
I mean,
60%?
Amazon is making this book.
Okay.
They're paying for the production cost. Now, if
Oh.
I want to buy a copy of this particular book based on its length, it only costs me $2.15. So, like when I sell these during a book signing or a music tour or on Sunday, our reunion is Sunday at 6 p.m. I'm hosting a poetry open mic night at Vita in San Marcos. So our writers retreat reunion will be if you guys want to come and read poetry during this poetry open mic night that I'm hosting. It's our
This Sunday.
this Sunday at Vita. So it's our
Move fast.
writers retreat
A
reunion.
10-year reunion.
Already this Sunday, like in 2 days.
2 days. They contacted me because I used to do it there, and I just in the habit of saying yes to things. So, so this because I use KDP.com, and that's the one I would recommend. It's a subsidiary of Amazon, so we do get some people that are so anti-Amazon that they do themselves the disservice of not using the tools that allow them to make this book available Amazon Prime in like 50 countries on the planet. I have no upfront investment fees. Now, I did pay a graphic designer to do my layout, which is a very nice layout. You can see that the night sky changes in the bottom corner. I did hire a guy that was living here, Feng, to do this cover. But for him, it was great. He got $100 to get paid for his art. Like, I love that. This graphic designer I've known for a while. She lives in Guatemala City. I wrote an essay at the end about this guy that I was working for a while. So that's one way. Like social media, you being able to cultivate an audience that's interested in your work and then sell your work to them, as I've been able to do, is one model to success as a writer. I still want to publish my novel with a big publisher, right? To release it, Jerry the Hamster. I'm going to go that road. But I'm at this beautiful place where if the whole publishing world closes their door to me, I'm connected with readers that like me, like my work, purchase my work. One of them's here. She came to my writer's retreat. Because that's how I met you first and foremost, was someone who saw what I was doing online and started buying my writing as books. And then I met you in person when you were on Erica's retreat. And then you had a book to write, and so you came to a writer's retreat, which is also a way as a writer I make income now. As a writer is by teaching writing. Now, I've ghostwritten 3 books for other people. If that's something you're capable of doing, great. Upwork.com, write that down, because it's a freelance writers forum where you can find writing projects, you can get an account, and you can apply. And if you're a copy editor, Upwork, it's an app you can get. I would say when you apply, list a lot of skills, not just like editing, because they try to keep, so they're trying to match freelancers with people that want freelancers to do their work. Fiverr.com, if you need to do, for $5, now I think it's like $10 is usually more, but you can get people to create your graphic design. My subsequent poetry book, The Upwards We Could Still Climb, I did all the layouts for that, the cover design, the graphic design, on pages on my iPhone. Because I only started using a computer recently. So this book, I made this on Canva, which is free for commercial use, the app. I made this back cover on Canva, which is free for commercial use. So I can use their resources to make images. So I didn't draw this image.
Was that a free logo, that design?
So this was, I put the bear paws, the lighthouse and the bear in there. I, put these icons there, but Canva has all those things, and you can use it for commercial use. So they can't say you can't do that as a book.
Because they've got a lot of them are behind. You've got to pay like $1 to get the icon or something. Did you pay for any of those icons?
I have a $9 a month pro
Got it.
subscription, but you don't have to for all. And then I did this on Pages on my iPhone, because KDP, if you really want to do the work yourself, they'll explain what you need for your files, for your formatting. Now, there are plenty of graphic designers who will do the work for you for like $50, but you can, like I laid this out in my iPhone. I didn't even use a computer. And I was able to, right before I went to India this past summer, I wanted to get this book out in the world. You know, I was able to get images on Canva inside for it. This is my friend Baron, he did a picture for that one.
But what
So-
about Shutterstock?
Yeah, you can get commercial use. That's
Yeah.
what you want to make sure if you're doing self-publishing, is you want to get commercial use. So there are these options. Now here's another way you get paid as a writer. You write an article and you get published in a publication that pays for articles. My Ten Foon article, I'm friends. I met him once in person with Tim Leffel. He's got this website, perceptivetravel.com, the best travel writing from authors on the move. So in order to get published in Perceptive Travel, you have to have written a book, which for him, I think, is a filter, so he's not getting submissions from all travel writers. It's like he knows he's gonna get a certain higher caliber of submissions if you had to have write a book. So that's his niche publication. He pays $100 an article, and I've published maybe 20 articles on Perceptive Travel in the last 12 years, maybe more.
I found someone this morning on Facebook in the San Marcos community was willing to pay someone $50 an article that lives here to write articles about
Yeah.
San Marcos.
So this book of mine, my book of travel stories, The Nomad's Nomad, if you're watching online, it's a great book. So here it says, thanks to the publishers who published previous versions of the following stories that appear in this book. So Perceptive Travel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they pay $100 an article. I got paid $600 for this amount of articles. And then I put them in a book and I didn't have to write them because I already wrote them. The Expeditioner, they paid $40 an article. Okay, so I got 3. Travel Through History, they paid $50 an article. Go Nomad, they paid probably $50 an article. Cruising World, that was a glossy magazine where I wrote a 500-word piece from a sailing trip in Belize. They, I think, paid $200 for that article. So if you look at this represents $3,000 in income I had already earned, and it probably made the book a little easier to write because I was able to use. So after you publish, unless they buy exclusive right, you will know if you're signing away your permanent rights, because otherwise they're just buying, usually in this hemisphere, first North American serial publishing rights. So you can republish, you could even sell to another publication, things you've already published. Another way to find writing work is to go to Craigslist. They have jobs. They have writing jobs. Every major city has a Craigslist. When I was a rambling artist trying to make it in New York, I would be on Craigslist every day. And you know what? That's how I found Herbert Engelhardt, who was my highest source of income for 2 years. I found Beth Orovitz, who I ghost wrote her book with her, and then she hired me as an agent, and now she's hiring me because she wants me to help self-publish her. I found her on Upwork.com, and we soon took our business off Upwork because they take a fee, and we just started working together one-on-one. And back then, my billable rate to work with someone was $35 an hour. Nowadays, if somebody just wants my time, my billable rate is $125 an hour is what I charge people. But I give them, I also say, and if you don't think you like what you deserve, like if you don't think it was worth what you got from me, I give 100% refund. No one's ever asked me for that. But that's sort of just where I'm at, where if I'm just trading my time for income in a writing capacity, as a consultant or whatever, that's what I value my time at this stage of my life, because I have everything I need. Like I eat, I sleep, I'm around amazing people and community, and so I'm not trying, earning more income's great, but there's so many ways income comes in. Social media, I make a little bit from that. I have some subscribers to my Facebook page now if I ever get back in it. But so that sends $200 a month to me from my 40 subscribers. They can send stars for the videos I do. I often just drink tea and read my poetry to the camera, and then sometimes they send stars. Now I have ads on Facebook, so I'm making like $100 a month in ads. I make $2 every quarter from this book I wrote 13 years ago. Google AdSense sends me like $200 every 4 years for my ads on my website. If you click through to the links to my books, it's through an Amazon affiliate program. So those links also mean that I make not only the royalty of the book they buy, but 6% on their purchase. So if they happen to spend $1,000 that purchase, I'll make $60 on that purchase. Dahi and I, we love making them. We make little libritos, right? And then we release them on a one-time basis to people who like them and will actually pay us for them. And then we find someone to carry them in the States, and then we mail them. So I could make this list go on. I think the fact of the matter that is most important and the point to hit home is don't put yourself in a life situation where your art and creativity are compromised. So if you can, my eventual goal in life is going to be to just be a novelist and like not have to think about income more than like my hero Tom Robbins thought of it. Tom Robbins wrote a book every 4 or 5 years. He also wrote a lot of articles for magazines to probably make a little bit more income along the way. But my retirement plan is to get a little more famous before I die so that when I can't write anymore, I have enough books out in the world that a little bit of income is trickling in. And some might find that naive, but I find this model of working until you're too old to really have the sort of life that you want to live, and then like retiring at 66 is a form of death, like like the worst form of death while alive. So there's lots. The point of the matter is, if you're good at social media, maybe you want to start contacting your favorite authors who don't have a good social media presence, and maybe they will pay you to make little graphics of their quotes to put on their Instagram and Facebook. You'll never get that opportunity if you don't go for it, right? Wayne Gretzky, because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you keep putting yourself out there to be struck by lightning, eventually you'll be struck by lightning. And that means this guy was paying me $35 an hour to read his poetry, which I love to do, and give him my thoughts on it that I love to do. And he had 2,500 poems, so it lasted for 2 years. And those 2 years were my bread and butter. And I found him on Craigslist, and I was sending 50 cover letters to all sorts of people on Craigslist. And his typist called me 6 months later after I came back from like Kenya and was just smoking pot on a couch in an apartment in Brooklyn, wondering what I would do next. So I think the universe or God or whatever we call it, our dharma, our path, rewards us when we make those uncompromising steps towards our highest impulse. And I think when we don't do that, we don't deserve the success we think we deserve until we have made that commitment to do that. You remember the story on day 3 I told about cutting off those light bulbs and having that determination that if I make $100 a month as a writer, I live off $100 a month. I don't think about doing something else. And that's when things started to get easier for me until they got very difficult. When I made it and then an injury took it all away from me. So the fact of the matter is, though, if you're doing that, if you're doing what you love, if you're, zooming in different levels. Okay, so, Dahi's faced with the fact that he's got a cabin and a place to live, no known income to speak of, but he's got time on his side, and he should be able to figure it out by then.
He's writing his masterpiece right now.
And if he goes, you can go to Craigslist San Francisco, you can go to Craigslist Boston, you can go to Craigslist Salt Lake City. if you keep finding writing jobs and figuring out which ones are scams, because there's a lot of scams on Craigslist too, eventually you're gonna get a break. Eventually you're gonna find something. You know, hire Christina to be a business coach because she's really good at that. Or exchange reading. If you're a good copy editor, maybe she wants you to copy edit her manuscript and she'll give you free coaching for that. Or, you know, these are the types of things you can bring about in your life. And just, we understand we need to sleep in a bed usually, and we need to eat. And, you know, we might want to, you know, an amazing barber's not always just going to fly in and give us a haircut. So sometimes we need to say like $5 for a haircut or buy scissors. So positioning yourself to be able to live the writer's life is important. Yes, ideally that's every 4 years you write a novel and that pays your bills, but it takes a long time to get there, but you will get there if you don't give up, and if you're living a life that is compromising you being able to create what you want to one day monetize, then you're not going to get there. If I had the Bluetooth speaker, I'd play Alan Watts's 4 minutes about just do what you want, and eventually somebody will pay you for that because you'll become a master of it. And in this digitally nomadic world, never have we had all the tools. You know, if you're a trust fund baby, great, but that's not going to make your best work come forth, nor is it going to get you published. It just means you have the advantage of not needing to worry about how you're going to feed yourself. But I think sometimes they don't make it as far as those who are starving do, because the starving artist needs to make it or die in some sense. And those stakes that are very high drive us towards doing what needs to be done to get us where we need to go. And if the stakes are, well, you're fine anyways, so it's good to work from a place of discomfort on the dream of getting to that comfortable place we want to get there. You know, Pania Press, we'll see where this goes, but we do have a logo, we do have an imprint, and you know, we're out putting out books in the world. There's 23 poets published in this, and people all over the world can get it. And you know, Dahi is either going to, a big publisher is going to pick up his book or not, and if not, he's going to self-publish it. It's very clear that that's what he's going to do, so no one's going to stop him from writing his book. And then he'll have that for the rest of his life available for people to purchase, and it will be an income stream. To what degree, we don't know. And if he's finding other, the article rat race is one I wouldn't recommend, which is trying to get you basically have to get 10 jobs a month, because you have to get 10 publications a month. Continue to do that, because you know, when I publish this article I'm writing on perceptive travel, they also list in my bio the books that I've written. They put links to my books. So when you have a product to sell, then everything that you write, if you get paid for it, is also promotion of you and your work. The guy who wrote the intro, the foreword, for this, Bruce Northrum, one of my mentors, he put 3 very successful books out in the world in the 90s, travel writing books. He put a self-published book out after the 90s called The Roadmap to Happiness. He met me, he emailed me in Kenya because he liked an article he read of mine on perceptive travel. Back in the day, I was his favorite travel writer in his 20s. That's how old we go back. And he's like, look me up if you're ever in New York. And I was like, I'm actually flying to New York in 3 weeks. I went from Kenya to New York. We grabbed a beer together. He's been a friend, a mentor. He wrote the foreword to my book. And I met him because he read something of mine that he liked. And he contacted the editor, because he also wrote for this site, and just wanted to give me a shout out. So the more you put yourself out in the world that way, the more opportunities might just come your way. And you're also hopefully getting paid for that. So don't wait around for someone to find you. One of your writing blocks every week as a writer should have nothing to do with writing, and should have everything to do with marketing and outreach. And sometimes that can just be fooling around on the internet, seeing what's out there, reading writers' guidelines. Great resources, some require subscriptions. PW.org I like because they're free. They offer advice about publishing. You can find small presses, you can find agents, you can find contests. You entered a contest recently, right, Dahi?
Not recently, I entered a few after last week.
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4.
Okay. You didn't win, obviously, but I've heard about it. But he's also an Irish citizen, so he can also look for contests only available to Irish citizens, or, you know, women of color. There's contests where only women of color can enter. So, like, finding a niche for yourself. There's some contests that only people that have never been published before can enter. So if you've never been published, great. You're not competing against a lot of writers that maybe would want to enter this contest, but they can't because they've been published. And you can enter books in contests. You can enter. That's something. And as I say this, I'm also taking notes in my head that I should really do more of this.
I'll also add as well, like right on Huffington Post, they have a blog element where you can just like sign up and post blogs. I wrote like one of my blogs, I didn't expect this at all, I was just writing crap. And then it got 300 shares and like 5,000 likes or 3,000 likes or something. And then I mentioned on the first day, it got picked up by a publisher who sent the article out to 12,000 schools in the UK. Wow. And I was like, I was just writing to like throw it up online. I had no idea that would happen. Yeah.
And the more you do that, the
so
more
Medium-
stuff like that will keep happening.
Exactly. So Medium as well is a good one, but Huffington Post blog.
And when you do have a book or a website or something to point them to, it becomes ever more valuable. Because imagine then if you had a link on there that went to your book that they could buy, or to your blog, or to your website.
I have a question. So I have a website and we have a blog, but most of the writing, there's only a couple of articles from me, but Jeff wrote a bunch of articles before he passed away. Would I be able to enter, because he was an amazing writer, would I be able to like submit some of his writings to something?
Who is his next of kin who would own those copyrights? Jeff was, what was he to you?
He was just my partner, but he was my business partner though. We were 50-50 business partners.
You'd want to contact his estate
His estate, okay.
and find out who would have the rights to that.
Okay, that's his wife.
Okay, so you would.
Never mind.
Random question. Did anyone accidentally take my phone?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Oh, okay. 'Cause
I
was
didn't
just
accidentally,
looking
I
for
brought it up to
like-
give to you. Hold on.
Is that where you went?
Yeah, I was like stressed out. I was like, I can't find my phone.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It's in Philip's room.
Strange. Philip, why is her phone in your room?
It was in my pants.
It's not in my room. It's in my pants. It's getting more weird.
I changed the shorts. This isn't weird, I swear.
We were like looking it for, everyone was looking for it downstairs. Thank you.
Elizabeth Gilbert also talks about not taxing your art with making your living. So keeping that in mind too.
What was
There
that?
are ways to make, well, maybe if you came to class, Philip, you would know. What was that as he walked into his room?
Could you teach a little louder, please, so I can
great, you
hear
have a
him
Bluetooth
from my
speaker.
room?
Yeah,
borrow
well,
it.
this,
Okay, thank you.
maybe if you
I
stop.
do have one
throwing knives
one
at me.
short thing that I want to do before we leave, but 7 minutes. Okay, so just so you guys know, we have 20 minutes left of this, and then we have a 4.5 hour block. My recommendation is to get at least 2 good writing blocks in there before lunch, after lunch, to just spend that time on this. Everyone is welcome to stay here tonight, so rather than having to figure out where to go from here, you could probably even stay 2 nights if you want to stay for Kirk time, so that's all cool. Some of us might have to leave after tonight, so that's all cool too. I guess questions and comments about the career as a writer, because people do this. I do it. That's how I've made my living since 2012. So for 10 years I've been doing it. That's how Karun is here. That's where Karuna does not pay for itself or support itself yet, but I joke like as a broke writer, I'm still supporting Karuna, and Karuna sort of takes all my other income streams into itself. But I'm also making the choice to employ 6 people to continue building this place and paying for the materials. So I could turn that off at any time, and that gives me a sort of confidence of that I didn't have when I was a nomadic traveler living out of a backpack with never more than a few $100s in my bank account, and usually a never vacillating credit card debt. Yeah.
I was gonna say it's relatable.
So, like, dreams come true to those who don't stop believing in them. It's something I have to believe in. I can tell you, man, I was close, man, in 2013, that very harsh winter, to going and getting a real job and making a bunch of money, and then starting my dreams. And maybe that would have been the better model. I remember kind of having, not like jealousy, but something close to it. Sort of just a pause of remorse of finding those travelers on the road who would work for like 6 months and then they were completely free. And, you know, I could meet them at the hostels, and I was always hustling. Like, there was never a time I wasn't full on, because I always needed to be. I was never just like out on the beach. I was always like, okay, well, there's $200 in my bank account. Like, we need to. And then usually you get paid like 3 to 4 months after you've done the work. So I was always like, oh, Luca, 4 months ago, great job. Like, this month's a little more comfortable. But just keep searching. If you need money to get by, to eat, to prevent you from going off into the life that will destroy your dreams, and that's your priority, then doesn't mean you don't have time to write, but it means that's your focus. And whether you're a masseuse, that's fine. Like, as long as what you do to earn your money doesn't compromise your creativity to the point that you don't have energy left for your craft. That's the important thing. It doesn't mean you have to make your living as a writer, but like, don't get caught in that rat race life that will take your life away from you, because they don't give it back. They just give you a worn out version of yourself that's now stuck with all these financial obligations, so you have to keep running the rat race, is my view on that.
Thank you for that. I needed to hear that. Thanks.
Don't do it, man. Your life is not worth that flesh exchange, you know. Because I've also, my relationship with money is that the less I worry about it, the more it seems to always show up when you need it. And but that's also because I work very hard. I see that you can have that view if you work very hard. If you have that view and just like don't work hard, I don't think it works. So discipline, effort, habits, work ethics, these are all things we start every moment that we begin again, walking forward into our lives. And you know, I'm right there too. I'm like, how can I get my room so that it doesn't go to this level of entropy that it continues to go to? I'm very messy, but I'm always cleaning my mess. I'm not. I've been cleaning my room for 37 years. And at the end of this is the reason why we're doing it. Because our story is worth telling. Like, we are some of the people that are here because we have the gift of expression. We have the gift of articulation. For whatever reason, we're all calling ourselves writers. We all are writers. And with that comes our responsibility to the writing itself, to the gift we have to nurture it. And that becomes the key, as I've learned, is just worrying about showing up for your work. Everything else will, if you're doing all the right things, if you're thinking about it in the right way, all the rest will come. But if you're merely writing all the time, first drafts in a notebook and putting it under your bed, all that happens is you eventually need to get another bed because there isn't enough room for it. So, like, what we've walked through over this week is this full story arc of what's required of us. Most of the work of the writer is the rewriter, okay? Getting ourselves in the right conversations with the right people who are up against the same struggle will support us. So talking to other writers, watching YouTube videos about writing, making a point to educate and read books on the craft of writing like this. These are all really invaluable. Putting together final drafts, putting it aside, asking somebody else to read it and asking for their feedback. Taking not all of their feedback, but the feedback that resonates with you, because we don't want to get into the habit of just making a change because somebody said that they would like it this way, because then we're losing our own authentic expression. But also, learning to take feedback with grace, even if they say something that we know is completely wrong because we wrote it and they said, just being able to hold that. It was very hard. My mom was one of my great editors. She was always and still continues to be willing to read my work, and it's very hard to get writing feedback from your mom.
My mom too.
But
She's an English teacher. She always reads my stuff in drafts and mechanics.
and she's right a lot of the time. Now she's gonna anything that is at all triggering to her sense of morality, she's gonna want me to take out. So I'm A, not gonna send her my racist stuff, but B, gonna understand that her as a 66-year-old woman might have different ideas than I do about what one should put out as publishable into the world. But you're already all writers, and where we want to go is just simply the mountain we have to climb. So it's pretty cool that we get to be here on this journey together. Like, you see the hard work of yourself, you know it, and you've witnessed the hard work of everyone around you this week. We're all just like doing the absolute best we can in the way that people do math, right? We need to really think about it. But then there's also the inspiring free flows. There's the times we wake up at 3:30. We didn't plan a writing session, but we know it's time to put our pen to the paper. So being available to those times, to being able to listen to that voice that pulls us, and then short assignments. Like as you were working on your book, Dahi and I would be really happy to publish your librito. We're working on a way that we can give a certain amount of these free to people and then maybe sell them here or online to make it work for us. So like definitely come join us. There's 11 writers, 12, something like that have published something like 25 works through this little imprint that exists because we say it exists. Because we made a logo, we gave it a name, and we're publishing our work under it. So the good news is we're going to continue publishing our works and putting them out in the world as just part of our daily life. It's just going to be, I made one of these since India, but this is just going to be something I do for the foreseeable future. In the same way, putting some of my poems into Canva to put them on Instagram is just something I'm going to be doing because I don't believe in this scorning of social media, and it does make me want to read something else. So I'll end by reading this instead of the video. Questions, comments before we dive into a short reading? How does that all feel for you? How are you all feeling?
Very good.
Day 5.
Loving it.
Yeah?
Thank you for that.
I'm excited
To work with.
to write more. I want to write.
Yeah. Sounds like the water's back on.
No, that's a river irrigated thing.
Boo.
There could be. Sometimes it's.
I just want to shower.
Okay. So here is my manifesto. This is the more edited version that appeared in this book, The Upwards We Could Still Climb. And I will just read it to you guys because I think it's very relevant to what we're doing. Manifesto. Giving into our times is soaring and sublime. You may notice something about this book. No, I don't mean its fabulous cream-colored pages, though they are delightful. Nor am I talking about the matte finish cover designed akin to the skin of a baby mole rat. Go on now, rub this book across your face to see what I mean. What I mean is, you may notice a few Canva images created for Instagram interspersed in between the meat and potatoes poems. Perhaps that seems not so far out or noteworthy, and if forced to contemplate this, you might conclude it is not so special and even mundane. So why am I bringing it up in the all-important second paragraph of an essay? Take a sip of this and follow me for a moment. Come sit with me around the fire of contemplative reflection and let me retrace with you a shift I've seen on a horizon I've been gazing at my whole life, namely poetry. But like more than that, say the role of poetry in our lives, which is to say our very lives, because poetry is a synonym and the same cause is just as prone to picking up a guitar to save the world, or a paintbrush, or do a dance at the all-opportune moment when a little jig might just save us all. And within this, there is, as there always is and will be, a noteworthy shifting. And it is we who gain something by seeing and noting this beautiful blossoming for what it is, rather than falling into fearing it. I'm not just talking about the internet, but the new human minds it created. Device-driven attention spans that have steered minds away from the deeper depths of, say, sitting down with a tome of contemporary verse, though this experience is still available and enjoyed. An oft-posed question goes like this. Is mass culture watering down the sacred waters of our art forms with the profane whiskey of their dopamine-driven attention spans? But whenever you hear someone pose a question such as this, your best response is to tickle them. For there are those who observe the times and there are those who are them. And I say we all opt for the latter and forget about spending time framing the world into a binary place and asking either or questions from within the walls we constructed. It may get you into grad school, but it will only constrict your heart. Accepting the wildness of the foreboding social media world with all of its glaring glory. Everyone who remembers the last 2 decades of yesterdays agrees. The world has changed in irrevocable ways. Gone are the days when answering the phone meant disconnecting someone on their internet connection that for the last 15 minutes was focused on downloading a bare naked lady song from Napster. Now phones and the internet are one, and they live behind a high-definition mini-screen, which is a supercomputer that people, some children, carry around in their pockets. And poetry, that timeless weaving of words, that innocent and ancient bystander got caught in the middle of TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Tumblr, Bumblebee Pie, Reddit, Wild Man of Borneo Book, Pinterest, and Telegraph. Friends, we are tumbling and rumbling forward at such an outlandish trajectory that by the time this title hits print, these monikers will have been replaced by a new set of not yet invented social media giant names. Yet, and we still need to ponder this more. When something wipes out all the zeros and ones, might this artifact in your hand survive? Might some far-off culture find the page's work as both a fire starter and toilet paper? To many eyes, it often seems that all this social media giant billion-dollar feeding frenzy looks like a competitive Shark Tank of trending in and out, of preference and dominance, and maybe we ought to just leave it all and go camping while there's still some forests left. But seen from these poets' eyes, this artist's gaze, what I now see is a surfeit of new and daring poetic forms, each with their own agility and abilities, forging new possibilities of expression within an artist's willingness to employ them. Because art, above all, requires willingness to bite into whatever brave new cake the culture cooks for you. No need to ask where the path goes. Follow it and you will see from a point that only you can. With this new poetic world of technology and timeless tradition, within this new poetic world of new technology and timeless tradition are freshly paved avenues of acceptance, possibility, and preference I found myself walking down lately. And what I've ultimately learned in life is to eat the cake without worrying about what it means to be delicious. I too was once like you, Professor Tight Pants. I know. For I was once part of the very reluctant too. I also just wanted to sit before some deep mahogany medieval desk in silky clown clothes and dip my quill into my stained inkwell and pour my thoughts onto the burned page in crisp calligraphy. I too just wanted to seal such sentiments with wax slowly melted over a brass oil lamp and put it into a crinkly old envelope and give it to horse riders who were headed north to Charlemagne, where my publisher would say brilliant and publish it in the underground newspaper from which the kindred spirits of the resistance would read it and hark and sigh. I understand firsthand the reluctance to embrace high art from the same places where that meme of the baby doing the oh yeah gesture appears year after year with new slogans and sentiments. Friends, I know, for I have lived for years on No Way Jose Street, a long stretch of the highway on the Ile de Reluctance, where I donned leather shoes and tight corduroy pants, where I took sips of tea and said words like hence and where. I'd take a few afternoon tokes on my corncob pipe, where I would pick up one of my many leather-bound books lying around, read it, and sigh. I had the finest stationery imaginable, notebooks piled atop notebooks filled with thoughts piled atop thoughts, journals with covers rugged as the exploits of Indiana Jones that were filled with shrewdly drawn maps and Airbnb numbers and dreams and plans. I wore my suspenders ironically in those days, but not in the sense of cultural irony. And it wasn't, bear with me, it gets somewhere. And it wasn't literary irony, but the kind of irony your urologist won't talk about. And if by now you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, then you've fallen right into my ploy to confuse you. For I am a poet, and I have perplexed people with my nuance. For 36 years I've been hiding among you, pretending at first to be a baby, breathing in all the fresh oxygen of earth, growing stronger while keeping the literary forms of my forefathers alive in my heart, and sometimes when no one is looking, I stretch my wings and fly. And I gotta tell you, from that soaring I've often looked below, perhaps coughing dryly. I've looked at all the woo-hoo and hickory-doo about TikTok and Instagram. All the hocus-pocus poetry with the fancy glitter reminded me of Instagram yoga, which reminds me of debasing a sacred thing. So for many a long year I wore my tight corduroys and restrained myself to keeping writing on the page and submitting those pages to literary journals where nary the day is nigh. I remember I had my reasons, though the memory of what those were grows fainter by the day. And lo, it happened in the year of the ox. But friends, sometimes the Jesus of your destiny comes walking into the bar, sits down next to you, and orders you a round of something very new. Something you've never tried before, and it turns out you like it. Swift as sudden forgiveness, a young woman rolled up to the weekly poetry circle of Karuna Aptit Long, where I often keep quorum, and showed me her poetry on TikTok, and I was taken. I got tired of resisting, so I joined the resistance. So it was, dear sexy reader, in the year of the ox, I annexed myself from a land of limited thinking and started playing around with my poetry using the toys of our time. That's right, Professor, I opened a TikTok account and put my poetry into that whirling machine, and what came out was fairly cool. If you don't know what TikTok is, it's a digital land where 80% of people shake their booty to music 90% of the time in tight clothes. But friends, there is artistic endeavoring there. There are poets and troubadours, mischief makers and rabble-rousers, and people who cook food very quickly. I launched an Instagram account dedicated to my poetry and started just throwing my verse into that on a somewhat regular basis. And it was fun. Now I have Instagram poetry friends. And I don't know if we'd necessarily take a bullet for one another, but sometimes we share each other's content in our stories, and that makes everyone feel a little better about all the edges and sharp angles we keep finding here on Earth. Sometimes now when I'm writing, I'm not really writing. I'm weaving my poetry into ways that use words and more, music, glitter, voice, and it feels like it comes from that same inspired place, which when working from, you always feel good. I remix poems of the past into cool new ways using a few of the apps out there. I'm fairly limited given my many digital ineptitudes and general haste with these things, but I'm having fun. It's like playing around. It's nice to read your poetry and add music you intuitively connect to the verse in the background. And that's what the interwoven digital world is when it isn't overwhelming and overheating. It's nice. So that's all I have to say about that, my friends. And if you're with me, and don't write to your Congress people. They never write back. Write to poets and university professors who teach poetry and tell them to knock it off. Ask them why we can't find them on Instagram. You tell them. Form is the shape that content takes, damn it. And you'll be damned to hear another professional claim to know what the hell we're all doing on Earth anyways. So who really knows if a sparkly Instagram reel with the theme of Jurassic Park playing over some poetry about a buffalo is high art or not? Think of Duchamp's urinal, or the fact that Dali's mustache didn't just curl up one day. Craft gets craftier by the richness of tools as painting relies on colors and brushes and canvases. Everywhere on Earth seems a giant multitude of limitlessness, and it's very easy to get lost within it all. But the galore is only in our mind after all. When you actually log in, if you stop to do more than just push content out in some misguided idea that fame would straighten your twisted heart, you'll notice something. It's just people. It's just people out there. It's a place to discover others like you, yet not so much like you. Some as different from you as people get, but poets nonetheless. Poets who are students in a tough neighborhood in the Bronx who mix verse with rhyme, and even though they are from a place of distant hard knocks, it's clear they just want peace and meaning and love too. Or how about an auto mechanic from Cleveland who writes his thoughts from under a truck on Instagram? You can follow Ukrainian poets in real time, and there's a vibrant crew of breakdancing wordsmiths coming out of India, and this list goes on. Diversity is key to healthy ecosystems, and all the mass forms of social communication are also fostering new avenues of expression, form, and an oft-forgotten yet crucial ingredient, audience. When we as artists and creators do not feel we have a table to bring our gift to is where we truly get lost. Each of the social media platforms is one such table where one can cultivate a community as receiver and giver of the gift. I often quote Thoreau that most people lead lives of quiet desperation and die with the song still on their lips. I say it as a cautionary tale so that young artists don't grow to become the famed yet overrated tortured artists. Sing your song, share your gift in every way you can, whenever you can, and then repeat. The year of the ox was not just the year I dove into the poetic astral realms online. It was also the year I got back to basics. I acquired a $100 printer and began playing around with making little poetry booklets I dubbed libritos. I started a little baby publishing house whose pioneering form is a 12-page book made from a single page printed front and back, a librito. At the time of this writing, 5 poets have collectively put out 11 libritos into the world, numbering 3,000 copies. And they're cute, and it's good for our hearts to see our work in the form called physical in the place known as the world. In the weekly poetry circle I've been hosting for just over 2 years, I often encourage uncertain writers to go boldly forward. Go for the big publishing contract, I tell them. Do all the right things. But don't worry if you don't get where you thought you wanted to go, and don't let it limit you from sharing your work with the world. Create, craft, and share, then repeat. For never has the world been more open to the creative to share their art. Artists, poets, writers, musicians, this is our time. Self-publishing print on demand allows you to put your work into a globally accessible book business. Musicians, we have such a great number of ways to sing, record, and share. And we all can talk as people to the people who appreciate us for that place we appreciate most about ourselves, our artistic endeavoring. This is no small change for the artistic world. So let us come together and blossom in the fields we fertilize together, supporting as we want to be supported. If we are all connected and together we all individually rise, what do you imagine might happen? The revolution won't be televised, but it will likely be shared on someone's Facebook wall. Nice. So the point is also, like, all of us are here to help each other. Any of you publish a book, you bet, like, maybe I'll be banned from Facebook, maybe I'll come back, maybe it will be shared. You know, I will definitely share anything you guys put out in the world you want me to share. And if we all do that for each other, we have a pretty good collective to help get our work out into the world. So take advantage of the time that we're in. Never before have you been able to do that in the world. Like, self-publish a book, make it available all over the world, tell your friend in France to get it, and in 2 days it gets delivered. Who knows how long that's going to last? Humanity seems to think like we're going to continue to improve, but who knows what could happen? You know, natural disaster, human disaster. We could be back in the dark ages, but you know, in the future, this might work well for us fire starter with toilet paper. There's these magical books like the one I found in California of this kindred spirit, 100 years in the past of the world, and we've connected through his book that he left in the world. Like, I can, in a very good way, because I'll be dead, so there's no vanity in this, right? Wonder if maybe some young artist will find one of my remaining poems 100, 200 years from now, and it might mean something to them in the way that we've all had something mean something very great to us in our own artistic endeavoring. So let's just have the most fun in these lifetimes and go forward very boldly into our written work, because no one will prevent you from putting it out in the world. So you try to get a big publishing contract, but you don't have to worry about it because you have a plan B and a plan C, and if finances are of your highest concern, you can all write. So you can all find like digital nomad work that if you're living in the third world, working for the first world, you don't have to work so hard. I had, when I contacted my travel insurance company, Seven Corners, I was making $500 a month for 4.5 years, writing 2,000 word articles a month that would take me 2 days. And I could live off that $500. Not well, but I could live and work 2 days a month. And then I had 28 days of the month to do whatever I wanted to do, which was usually try to earn more income. But all that aside, you don't get those opportunities if you don't go for them. So just be relentless. Be absolutely relentless in doing what you need to do. The basics are finding a way to make a living, but don't sell out. Don't live someone else's life. Like, the world has yawned itself to sleep over the people that traded their gift for money. You know, for comfort, for security. Like, fuck security. Like, follow your heart. Be cautious. Be smart. Be wise. Be aware. Be determined. Don't give up. Believe in yourself. That's it. You can't fail, because when failure is not an option, success is inevitable. And I only found success when I fully embodied that and made 100% commitment not to go try to find some other job. That if I was, you know, in my mid-20s living in my parents' basement, which I never was, I wouldn't go back till I was 30. In my parents' basement.
I was talking to you from my mom's attic.
Yep. That's because of my neck injury, so that was hard too. And I worked as a waiter because in my hometown, which was very humbling, because like the parents and the people I went to high school with were at that restaurant, and they didn't know about my previous 8 years running one of the largest charities in Guatemala, like writing books, traveling to 50 countries. They just knew, oh, Luke never amounted to anything, and he's a waiter at the Pond, which is the name of the restaurant. But that was a great experience for me because it was very humbling. And humbling experiences are very great because if we have experiences that humble us, we still need to be humbled a little bit. So I can look at that experience and say that was that. I think you guys were all very motivated and inspired. I see it in your eyes, so I won't repeat much more than I believe in the power of the audience. I believe that this is not just a fun way to end our retreat, but the capstone of why we create anyways is to share. So I really look forward to that as we close out this retreat, and we have 4.5 hours before that. So yeah, may we all make great use of this time, and it's just, I'll say more to this tonight, but it's really a thrill to find myself amongst you all. It's inspiring to me to know that we're out there, we're working hard, and we have something to say, and we're going to do our best to say it as authentically as we can.
Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you, Luke.
And tomorrow, if anyone wants, I'm actually excited to organize the books. And it's a great way to get acquainted with these books that some are randomly left here. Most are books I've brought here for the reasons I have. And so if you want to familiarize yourself with what's available here, tomorrow I'm going to make a bunch of tea, play some great music, and organize a bookshelf. So, but anyways, let's, so who would like to meet with me one-on-one? Okay.
I'll be here, so someone, maybe everyone else.
I mean,
chooses first.
we can all. So Neil is at 1 p.m. So Christina 1:25. Phil, 1:30.
Sure.
One 1:30 to 2 p.m. Well, technically we'll do 25-minute blocks. But, 2 p.m. to 2:30. Dahi, do you want to meet?
It's, I want to dive into some
Okay.
notes.
Okay. So, Shanti 2:30 to 3. And I'm not sure where Echo is, but we can tell her we gave her 3 to 3:30 if she wants it. So, awesome guys. Well, come to my house for our one-on-ones, and great.
I haven't been there yet. Is it up the hill?
It's same property. Just keep walking back. Cool.
Sorry, what time did you just say?
So it's noon now. Oh,
No.
sorry for your time. 2:30 to 3.
30 to 3.
And then we will start here at 4:30. We'll probably start at 5. I have a session till 3:30, so I'll start setting up after that. If anyone is around and free and wants to help me set up, I'll entertain the help, but don't sacrifice your writing on me. I can do it. I can set up on my own. Great.
Can you play the Alan Watts thing, please? I was looking forward to that.
Let's close down this.
Yeah. Then you get to listen.
Thank you if anyone joined us.
Sorry.
I'm not sure what the title is, but Luke said he was going to play it earlier.